It's it's gonna be May. Ooh, yeah. End of the year party. They need a volunteer to bring a special Pinterest snack. End of the year play. There's rehearsals every day, an hour away. You keep going back. We got all these things to do. When the year is almost through, you end up grade testing again. Stressing them out. Morning 3 hours of hobbies. Yeah, your lunch is a piece of cheese. Guess what? It's gonna be May. Participation trophy from the sports banquet, and it's at 9 p.m. on a school night. Yeah, you thought Christmas felt your day, but Christmas got nothing on me. It's summer camp time. We forgot the deadline. We got all these things to do. There's a fundraiser too. Oh, no. Gotta sell these chocolate bars. Got a whole box to our neighbors. Come on, we're into a nutshell. Oh yeah, it's good 'cause our schools, they need it. Guess what? It's gonna be May. Choreography practice.
Done.
I feel like I should be moving my shoulders a little bit.
How many of you know that things don't often turn out in life quite the way you thought they will? Anybody experience that a little bit in your life? I did, and it didn't quite land like that, because the reality is life has its ups, it has its downs. It has a tendency to throw curveballs your way. Things kind of come into your life that you don't plan on or you don't expect, and it's all sorts of things. I mean, you could lose your job. You could get a health report that you weren't expecting. Your child can be born with a sickness or a disability that you have to work through. An addiction can enter the marriage or the family. Infidelity can enter. Divorce, separation, things of that nature can crash down your perfect picture of the way things are supposed to be. Because life has unexpected turns. And it can happen at any time. The bigger problem of this, and what I realized, was when you have this unrealistic picture, this perfect picture of the way things are supposed to be, you then begin to kind of measure yourself to that. And when you measure yourself to that and you don't meet those goals, you don't meet those expectations, then you kind of think you're a failure. And you think, man, I did something wrong. I'm no good. And what's worse is sometimes we'll take those unexpected things and sometimes we'll take that perfect picture and we'll start measuring other people around us to that picture as well too. And when they don't meet our expectations, well, suddenly now there's stress and there's tension in the relationship because you're holding them to a standard they could never meet to begin with. So I realized this perfect picture was a trap. It's a trap many of us get into, and it's a trap that we have to be careful of. In fact, what I will tell you this is unrealistic pictures can paralyze not only your families, but they can also paralyze your marriages and your relationships as well too. So we have to be careful about having unrealistic dreams and pictures. It's okay to have dreams, but we have to be understanding the fact that life has a tendency to throw curveballs at us. Things don't always turn out the way they plan. Parenting is messy. Sometimes family is messy. And the most important thing, Pastor Ben kind of hit on this earlier, there's no one way to do parenting. And now in our culture, we like to sometimes put things in nice, neat packages and say, hey, here's the 3 steps to being a great parent, and if you'll just do these things. But as we talked about, life throws curveballs. Things don't always happen as planned. And so because of that, parenting's going to look different for all of us. It's going to be unique to all of us. There is no one way. There is no nice, pretty packages. All of us are living our own story and living in our own set of events and circumstances that are going on around us. And for that reason, all of us are going to have to engage this parenting thing and engage life in our own unique story, in our own unique way. But there are some principles that we can hold to, some that are common amongst all of us and are important for us to understand. The first one is this, and this principle is for everyone, and I think this is key and important for us to understand as we're raising up the next generation. And that's this: no one has more potential to influence your child like you. Parents, no one has more potential to influence your child like you. And that's the question we're asking throughout this series, is that question like, who is influencing your child? What is influencing your child? Do we recognize those things? Are we aware of them and engaging those things in our lives? But parents, for good or for bad, you're going to influence your children. That's the responsibility we carry. We have the greatest influence as parents on our children than anyone else. Yes, there are many influences in your child's life, and you need multiple influences in your life, but what we're saying is you're the primary influence in their life. More so than the teachers, coaches, even pastors, you have the primary responsibility of influencing your child in life. And so if right about now you're thinking that's a lot of pressure, good. It is. As parents, we have an enormous responsibility to speak into the lives of the next generation and the kids that we have. But one thing we have to keep in mind that weaves itself throughout this entire conversation and is important is this: our influence has more to do with relationships than it does our skills as parents. Our influence with our family and our kids, it's more about relationship than it is our skills as parents. It is not our job as parents to impress our kids with our awesome parenting, okay? It's not. It's not our job to impress our kids with our awesome parenting. It is, however, our job to impress on our kids the love of God and the character of God in everything they do. And there's a difference between those two things. We're not all going to be the perfect parent. It's a big job. And at times, sometimes we're going to say, man, it just seems impossible. We throw our hands in there and go, I don't know if I can do this. And the reality is, it is hard. It can sometimes seem impossible. And if we're going to be the parents that I think God is calling us to be and raise up the kids that He's calling us to raise up, we're going to have to increase our capacity. We're going to have to lean on other people, other things. We're going to have to parent beyond what we think we are capable of. And parents, you can do this. You can do this. Step one is to recognize, hey, things are hard out there. Life does have a tendency to throw curveballs. I don't have to be a perfect parent. I need to live out the story that I'm living in. I don't need to impress my kids or anybody else with my parenting. I just need to impress on them that there is a God and that you can love Him, He loves you, and you can be more and more like Him in all that you do. But if we're going to raise up a generation, we're going to have to realize that we're going to have to go beyond just our capacity in raising up that generation and partner with other people and use other tools in order to raise up this child. We can do it, but if you just say, hey, I'm going to do it alone and do it in isolation, it will seem overwhelming, if not at times impossible. So what are some ways then that we can increase our capacity of parenting? Some ways that we can take this thing to the next level. Well, I want to share 5 of them today that I want to challenge you with that I think will be helpful if you want to increase your capacity as a parent. The first one we talked about a little bit last week, and that's this: you will need to widen your circle. If you want to parent beyond your capacity, you will need to widen your circle. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, it means that you've got to move that circle beyond just you. You're going to have to help rely on other people to help influence your child as well. Last week, we talked about the importance, and Ben even reminded us the importance during child dedication, that partnering with the church is one of those ways that you widen your circle. And we challenge you as parents that I unashamedly will tell you, I want every opportunity available to tell your child about Jesus. But that will only happen if you bring them. And the importance, it's not a guilt trip. It's like, I really do want every opportunity to teach your child, to teach the neighbors, to teach your grandkids. And if you bring them here, we have always said back in Radiant Kids that this is a fun place, a safe place, and they will learn about Jesus. We're unashamedly going to do that in everything we do. And as parents, if you want to take it to the next level, you've got to widen that circle and allow people like the church to partner with you in raising up the child. You will need to find teachers, you will need to find coaches, even the larger family as a whole to help partner with you in raising the child. Don't raise the child alone in isolation. You need help from godly people around you. Widen your circle. The next thing I want to encourage you to do is called imagine the end. Imagine the end. And what I mean by this is, well, first and foremost, I think most of us know, even watching that opening video, life can be crazy. Life can be busy. There's a lot of things competing for our time and attention in this world. And when that happens, it can be distracting and keep us from focusing on the things that are important. And if we think about it in various areas of our lives, many of us have goals. For many of you, you've got career goals, or maybe you have financial or retirement goals that you set. Perhaps you have goals for taking care of your body or exercising. For most of us and many of us out there, we have certain goals in life that we are throwing our darts at in hopes to hit it. But let me ask you a question as parents out there. Do you have goals for your children? Have you ever sat and talked as a family, as a husband and wife, or whatever it may be, and said, what's my goal in raising this child? Now, we have to be careful here, too, because there's a trap in this we have to live in the tension of. I know some parents that have very clear goals for their kids. Unfortunately, though, those goals go something like this. Yes, my kid's going to be a doctor. My kid's going to be a lawyer. My kid's going to be the beauty pageant winner, right? An astronaut, whatever it may be. And they raise the child up with full expectation that they're going to do those things. And it oftentimes, as many of us know, people like that ends up where the child rebels, gets angry, and even leaves the family later on in life. That's not what we're talking about here. And if we're being truthful with ourselves, you're asking that child to live out your dream for them rather than helping them explore God's dream and purpose for them in all that they're doing. That's not what we're talking about here. When I ask, do you and have you set goals for your kids, what I'm asking ultimately is, what kind of person do you want your kid to become? At the end of the day, when they leave, and kids, you will leave one day. I just want to be clear on that. I love you. No playing video games in my basement forever, all right? Someday, when they leave, what kind of kid do I want them to become? What kind of adult do I want them to become? Have you ever, as parents, sat and talked about that and thought about that? I think that's a really important conversation if you haven't, because the one thing I know about darts, and we talk about throwing darts and setting goals sometimes, the one surefire way to miss a target in darts every single time is to not put one up. You're guaranteed to miss it every single time. In fact, you'll start throwing your darts every which direction. But when you put a goal up, when you put a target up, now you start throwing your darts at the target. Do you hit the bullseye every time? No, but I bet you're throwing the darts in the general direction of it. When we set goals, it's like throwing darts in lives. It's something you're aiming towards. Have you, as parents, sat and talked ever before? Here's the goal, ultimately, the big dream that we'd like our kids to be when they become adults. What matters the most? In ancient Israel, it's interesting as we read, Ben even read some of these verses. It was a great tie-in to what we're doing. Those parents raised up their kids with a very clear goal, an expectation of who they are, why they were created, and what their purpose is in life. There's something that parents would recite 3 times a day with their kids. It's called the Shema. It was usually written somewhere in the house, most often on the doorpost of the home. They repeated this 3 times a day to remind themselves of what the goal is and the importance of it. We learned this story from Moses. He instructs the Israelites about this before they're to enter the promised land. Moses did not get to go with them, so he was about to go off and die. So these were final instructions he was giving them as they were about to enter the land that God had promised them. We see that in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. In that verse it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength." 3 times a day, the parents reinforced this idea. They taught their kids to memorize it and to recite it. And what was key in this idea, foundational to them, was this idea there is only one God, the Lord God. And you are to love that God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And so if you were to ask in ancient Israel, and for many Orthodox Jewish families today, what kind of child do I want them to become as an adult? What do I want them to become later on in life? They would say, I want them to be an adult that loves the Lord their God with all their heart, with all of their soul, and with all of their strength. That's a pretty good starting point for all of us. That we raise up kids that love the Lord their God with all of our hearts, all of our soul, and all of our strength. And what those parents were saying to the kids is this: God is a priority in our home. So here's the question I have to ask you. Is God a priority in your home? Is God at the center of your home? Or is something else competing for a space where only God should be? Is God at the center of your home? The next thing I want to challenge us to is called fight for the heart. Now, I don't know if your family's like mine, but every now and then arguments and fights happen. Yeah, I know. Maybe it is only my family. I get it. Y'all are perfect. I'm not. I get it. For all I know, that may have happened on the way to church today for some of you. In any family that genuinely loves each other, sometimes fights and arguments, they're gonna happen. What I've noticed, though, oftentimes is parents ultimately have the ultimate in the argument card, right? Don't we? When the child comes up and says, why do I have to do this thing? How do we answer that question? Because I? That's right. Game over. Right? No more arguing now. I have lowered the gavel. We are done talking here. Because I said so. But sometimes that can be really frustrating for a kid. And if you think back when you were a kid, you didn't always love hearing that from your parents either. When fights happen, arguments happen in the home, there's really a couple different postures we can engage with it, and I want to challenge us to. When they arise, we can either fight with them, or we can fight for them. And you say, well, what's the difference? Well, when you fight with someone, you have dug into the dirt and said, I'm going to win this argument. I'm going to win this thing. I am fighting with you in this thing because I intend to win. But when you fight for somebody, you're saying, I'm going to put your needs, wants, and desires above mine, and I want you to win. Ultimately, my goal here is for you to win. And there's a difference in this because there's a key statement that I want us to take away today that I think is ultimately important as parents, grandparents, just in life in general, and that's this. In life, you can win an argument. In fact, you could be right. You can win an argument. You can even force the kid to do the right behavior, but lose the heart. Did you hear that? You can win the argument, force the behavior, but still ultimately lose the heart of the child. Are you fighting with them? Are you fighting for them? Interestingly enough, same chapter in Deuteronomy, Moses would address this. In verse 20, he says, in the future, when your son asks you, what is the meaning of the stipulations, decrees, and laws the Lord our God has commanded you? I'm going to stop there just a second. It's basically your child coming up and saying, Mom, Dad, how come we're different than the neighbors? How come sometimes we do things differently than others? How come we don't always allow everything in our house? How come we live a little bit differently and do things a little bit differently in our life? Why are we set apart, Mom and Dad? That's a question he's asking there. Moses says, tell them, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand. Does it say in this, listen, if your child comes up and says, hey, how come y'all do things differently? How come we live a little bit differently? Why does it seem like we're set apart from the rest of the world? Is our answer supposed to be, because I said so? It's not. Listen, it's my hope and my desire that if my son and my daughters come up to me and say, Dad, why do we act differently, do things different sometimes? That I could look at them and say, son, your dad was not always a Christian. I've done some terrible things, things I regret deeply. I have hurt myself and the people around me. I have failed in many different ways. But I cried out to God and He heard my cries. And He came down to me and He forgave me and He set me free. And for that reason, I live for Him in everything that I do. Do you see the difference between that answer and because I said so? When your child asks, why do we do this? Fight for the heart. Teach them the love of God and point them towards Jesus in everything we do and say, fight for the heart. Fourth thing I remind us of is called create a rhythm. In our lives, we're going to have to create our rhythm. And what that ultimately means is this. Creating a rhythm means increasing the quality and the quantity of the time that we give our children. The quality and the quantity. And our kids want to spend time with us. It's amazing. They really do. I got reminded of this recently watching a commercial on TV of all things. And I wanted to show that commercial to you today to highlight just how important it is. Watch this with me if you could.
If you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, who would you choose?
Kylie Minogue.
Marilyn Monroe.
Oh God, I wouldn't have a clue.
I know, straight up. Paul Hogan.
Kim Kardashian.
No.
I'd like to have dinner with Justin Bieber.
What? He's not coming to my house.
I'd have Bob Hawke.
Dave Hughes.
Barry Humphries.
Jimi Hendrix.
People who have made a difference in the world, maybe Nelson Mandela at the dinner table.
I don't know what he's going to say, I'm scared.
If you could have dinner with anyone in the world, who would you choose?
Probably our whole family, like our whole extended family.
Mum and Dad. Mum and Dad. Does it have to be a celebrity? Could it be family?
We love it. We talk about how school is. We ask Mum and Dad how their day was.
Family.
Yeah, Mum and Dad.
Family. Who would you like to have dinner with?
They just want to be with us while they're eating food, which is pretty cool.
They see us above everything. I'm going to get...
Yeah. Bit of a message in it for me.
Yes.
we having for dinner?
Who'd have thought? Our kids want to spend time with us. And you are the greatest influence in their life. Moses reminds us in Deuteronomy 6:7. He said, impress them. He's talking about the laws, those statutes. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. You see the rhythm he's got there. He's saying, when you're home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, when you get up. He's saying there are some key times in your kids' lives when you really have an opportunity on a daily basis to speak into their lives and give them that quality and quantity of time they need to raise up a child centered on Jesus Christ. What are some of those times? It's when they wake up in the morning and you send them off to school or whatever it may be. It's when you're at the dinner table. It's when you're in the car. It's when they go to bed. In each of those opportunities, you have the privilege to speak into the life of your child. Be intentional about those moments. Listen to them. Learn from them. Have fun when they wake up, when you eat, when you're in the car, when they go to bed. 4 key times that you have on any given day to speak into their lives. It's so important. The last thing I want to remind us is this. Make it personal. Make it personal. And what do I mean by that? Deuteronomy 6:6, it says this. The commands that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Who's Moses talking to here? He's talking to the parents and to the leaders and the grandparents, all of those who influence a child as they're about to go into the promised land. He's saying, you have these things and let them be on your hearts. What that means is this. If you want to raise up a child that is centered on Jesus Christ and all that they do, it starts with you. You can't fake it. Kids can read through that in a heartbeat. Don't you know kids see more and know more than we ever give them credit for? Amen? If you want them to have an authentic relationship with Jesus Christ, you have to have an authentic relationship with Jesus Christ, and you have to model it and teach it in your home. And so when I talk about the need to have it be on your hearts, what we're saying is if you set a goal that I want my child to raise and be raised with the love of God and the character of God and all that they do, to love the Lord with all their hearts, all their soul, all their strength, it starts with you. You are the greatest influencer in their life. And our greatest way of influencing is to live it out in all that we do. Which gets us to our so what moment. Moses left the people with an important warning as they were about to go into the promised land. A warning that I think we need to heed and remember as well. He said in Deuteronomy 6:10, when the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give you, a land with large, flourishing cities you did not build, houses filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, wells you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Then, when you eat and you are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. Parents, essentially what's going on here is this. We talked about the reality that life has distractions and there are many things competing for our time and attention in life. That when you get in the busyness and the hurriedness of life, and when we get wrapped up in the affluence and the things we have of life, and as a country, let's face it, compared to other countries, we've got it much better than most do. That in our wealth, in our affluence, in our hurriedness and busyness and the chaos of life and the tyranny of the urgent, there's a tendency to forget God. Maybe that's happened in your family. Moses is cautioning them, don't do that. And I'm going to caution you too, don't do that. You have the opportunity to raise up a generation that's going to change the world. And so we have to look in our marriages, and we have to look at our families, and we have to look at life and ask, is there something in there competing where only God should be? What do we need to do? How do we ultimately say, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord? How do we keep the focus on God in everything we do? Because I'll say it time and time again, this world doesn't need to see perfect parents. What they need is hope. They need to see that God can redeem and change any story out there, including yours. They don't need your perfect parenting, they need hope. Because the Bible is full of stories of parents who made bad decisions and blew it along the way. Maybe you have too. Churches are made up of broken people, families are made up of broken people, but both exist for the same reason. We exist to display the love of God in everything we do and say, and even more importantly, to teach it to the next generation. Let's pray. Dear Lord, what an enormous responsibility we have, but privilege, opportunity, challenge to raise up a generation that's truly going to change the world. But it starts with us. It starts with us as a church. It starts with us as parents. Boldly saying that we want to raise up children who have an authentic relationship with you, that love their God with all their hearts, all of their soul, and all of their strength. As parents, may that be our goal. May that be how we are raising our children. But Lord, if anybody out there doesn't have a relationship with you, may today be the day where they say, as for me and my house, we are going to serve the Lord. And may they start to model it and teach it to the child. We love you, Lord. We thank you for the privilege in raising up godly children who will take the baton and serve you. Thank you. Amen.